when we look to the Renaissance, why do we know about those people? We know about them because of the music and art. And so if aliens were to come to Earth years after we're all gone and there's no humans left, and what truth do we want them to see? I trust the composers. I trust them implicitly with completely emulating and mirroring within their music the struggles and the strife and the successes and the love and the loss and the beauty of our world. It's one of those things. There's so many people that can't compose music. I don't compose. It's not my place. My place is as conductor and facilitator of the artistic experience. But composers, when you look at our world, we don't want them to read the newspaper. We don't really want them to watch TV to get a true sense. It would just confuse them. The most non-confusing, most honest aspect of everything that we do is found in the compositions of our composers.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer, and this is episode 49. My guest for this episode is Chuck Maguire. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening and for your support. I'd like to ask if you can help me in a couple of ways. I rely on word of mouth to spread the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Now on to the episode. Hi, Chuck.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
Good. I got halfway through that and I realized I probably should have asked if Chuck was okay.
Chuck is totally fine. Yeah, this is going out to friends. So generally what I do is I try to separate my Chuck from Charles, but this is colleagues and friends. So Chuck is fine.
Well, I have like 20,000 listeners, right?
Oh, that's
I'm
pretty cool.
I'm just kidding. There's like 200 people.
we probably need to work on those numbers. So, yeah.
Well, one person at a time, That's how we do this. So, Chuck, can you introduce yourself and what you're doing right now and where you're living?
All right. Well, my name's Chuck Maguire, and I live in Las Vegas, Nevada. And right in the middle of the desert, I do a whole bunch of different things. I work as a consultant for band directors within the Clark County School District. And this past year, I took on 2 hours of teaching a day at a charter school, Pinecrest Academy, in South Las Vegas in the Henderson area. And then I guest conduct and clinic all over. And that's pretty much what I'm doing.
What's your origin story? How did you get involved in music as a child?
Oh, my gosh. It would be third grade at Rachel Patterson Junior High School or elementary school in Atmore, Alabama. Miss Ledford's third grade class, we had the band from the high school come over and perform a holiday concert in November. And I was captivated by Leroy Anderson's Sleigh Ride. And people probably don't have the same origin story, but this piece was just really incredible. And to hear something live in South Alabama, you don't get a lot of live orchestras and performances, and there's not a lot of things you can go to and experience. And to experience this at my elementary school at such a young age was life-changing. And eventually I went home that night, of course, and talked to my father. I was like, I want to be the guy with the stick. And he informed me that I had to learn to play an instrument, and I wasn't really happy with that. I didn't understand why I couldn't just go on and be the conductor. And then, of course, he added that I had to go to college. I ran to my room because I couldn't imagine going past 12th grade when I was in the third grade. And, of course, eventually went through middle school. I started out playing trombone in middle school and did not like it very much. And there was a girl in the flute section that I actually kind of thought was cool. So I decided to switch to play flute, and the rest is history. I went on to play in high school and college and, entered Troy University as a music education major in 1993.
Cool. And so thinking back, did you have one teacher along the way that really sort of made you think, okay, I want to be a music educator. I want to be that?
I think it wasn't really a music teacher that made me think that I wanted to be a teacher. I had in high school, I had a few teachers that were just really, really inspirational to me. And aside from my band director was really incredible, Mr. Lambert, John Lambert. But I had Miss Grissett was my English composition teacher and literature teacher. And just the way that she taught about the world and used literature and English literature to describe the way things were going on in the world. And she was just such an inspirational teacher. And she would be the actual person that I look back on as making me want to, or to have the desire to go into music education. I knew I wouldn't teach English literature, but because music was my thing, but I was most inspired by her and just the way she taught. It was just really, really incredible. So Miss Grissett, and then of course I had many teachers along the way that changed my course when I got into college. Of course, everybody is in Alabama knows the name Johnny Long with the Troy University band program, and just the association with Troy University. There's lots of composers and music educators that are pretty famous in our field that have come from there. And so I was constantly reminded and surrounded by people that were inspirational and that caused me to stay on the course to become a music educator. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting that an English teacher would have inspired you to go teach music. But, I think it's the love of teaching is what's important here.
It is. And it's, teachers make the world a better place. When everything is dark in the world and we have to be reminded of our humanity and what really matters in the world, a teacher can convey. It's not really about the subject. It's about the person. It's about teaching the person. And, being in high school has a lot more to do with becoming a citizen of the world than learning about the different aspects of literature and math and science. Those things are all, of course, very important. But she was the one that inspired me to go into teaching. And I knew that music was the vehicle by which I would get there. So.
Sure. So can you share your experience at Troy as an undergraduate? And you mentioned some of the great educators. You mentioned Johnny Long, but who else was there and what was that experience like?
Oh my gosh, it was absolutely incredible. So the marching band, of course, is notorious. The Sound of the South has 300 plus members in it. So the first day you arrive as a freshman, you're overwhelmed, but you have all these friends immediately. The environment was always very supportive, and you just had a lot of, you instantly had friends in the band program. And Johnny Long, of course, cultivated this program, started the program in 1965. And some of the other teachers, Robert W. Smith, of course, came in and took over the program after Johnny Long retired. In between the two of them, Ralph Ford took over the program for a year. And of course, when Robert W. Smith left Troy, Ralph Ford came in. So those three people, I think, would be the pivotal moments in time. I actually stayed in school. I don't know if Robert W. Smith knows this, but I stayed in school an extra semester. I could have graduated, or an extra year. I could have graduated and student taught in the fall, but I stayed a full year extra when he came in because I wanted a different experience and see how he would do things. And it was just really, really, really impressive and life-changing to experience the difference between Johnny Long and Robert W. Smith and Ralph Ford. It was pretty cool. Different perspectives of teaching. And a lot of people look at Robert W. Smith as this composer. That's what they know him as. But the music educator that he is, the way he handles rehearsals, the way he applies knowledge and the education to the students through the literature is pretty incredible. I haven't really seen anybody else do it exactly the way he does it. And so it was one of those moments that was life-changing. Well,
I hope he's listening. He's, of course, publishes some of my music.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
I need to get him on.
Yeah, absolutely. Just don't ask him about, me in theory class or or missing rehearsals. It was there was a moment when I actually missed a rehearsal, a dress rehearsal for a clinic, and the way he handled that was pretty life-changing as well. So it was, I was put in my place, and I learned very early on that you don't have to scream at somebody to, let them know that they had done something wrong. And it was really cool. Lots of life lessons from Troy, and I think that was the most influential time of my life. So.
Yeah, of course, I was being tongue-in-cheek. Robert's a very busy man, but can I ask you specifically? Can I ask you about that incident? You mentioned that you didn't have to be scolded or put down. How did he do that? What was the lesson?
Oh my gosh. So it's kind of a funny story. I went with his goddaughter, actually, who was in the flute section with me in the symphony band. We went to hang out with her boyfriend, and we didn't actually make it back in time for the dress rehearsal. And the next morning, we had answering machines at that time, of course. There was an answering machine message from him, 6 a.m. in the morning, telling me that I had to meet him in the office if I was going to play on the concert. And then we went in, and he just was very direct and very clear and concise. And if anybody has talked to him, he's very succinct and very clear and concise when he talks about anything. But it gets a little bit slower. His speech is even slower when he's scolding you for being in trouble or missing rehearsal. And just the way he handled it is what I remember most. He referred to me as his friend, and in communication and the way friends should handle situations like this. It was pretty life-changing. That moment, I look upon that moment as, because I'd always been yelled at. Kids get yelled at. And I probably wasn't the best undergraduate student, but I happened to be pretty good on flute. And, looking back on it, it was one of those moments that changed my perspective and made me shape up. And I owe a lot to that experience.
Yeah, I'm just now listening again to the Mindset book by Carol Dweck, and she would call that he instilled a growth mindset in you at that moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was, I was expecting the wrath, because he's such a big personality in so many ways. And just the intensity by which he rehearses, I was expecting that to just like an axe just come down. I wasn't expecting to be allowed to play on the concert, but just the way he handled it was, it was pretty incredible. I would agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So now I know that you then went on to the University of Alabama and then eventually to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas for a doctorate. Can you kind of take me through that story?
So after leaving Troy, I taught high school in Alabama for 5 years. I took a school that, of course, it had not made a superior rating at a festival in 13 years. And I was the guy that got to take over this job in Goshen, Alabama, right outside of Troy. Then I turned that program around, went on to Gulf Shores and started the band program in Gulf Shores on the beach. And then, of course, decided it was time if I was going to go into conducting, which was the thing that I really set out to do, I needed to go and get a master's degree. And then, of course, I went to the University of Alabama, met Demondre Thurman, who is still one of my greatest friends. I know he was recently on your show. He is one of those people that he embodies what it is to be a music student at the University of Alabama. And I studied, he does. I mean, it's just a fact. When I went to school and studied with Dr. the late Gerald Welker, who was the creator of the honor band and the Alabama Wind Ensemble at the University of Alabama, that is, pretty well known to this day. And I had conducting class with Demondre there, and the experience was just really life-changing. That's when I realized, you go through school, you become a band director, and you think that you're also a conductor. And it was that moment when I realized that band director and conductor are not necessarily the same thing. And so, developing the conducting and the types of information that you provide as a conductor is probably the most incredible lesson that I learned there. I remember Demondre and I being in literature class together with Dr. Welker, and he was just really swift, another strong personality, and just the way he wanted us to think about conducting. And so that's pretty much the experience at Alabama. And then, of course, after finishing the master's, I came straight to UNLV in Las Vegas to do the doctorate.
All right, Chuck. So let's talk then about your high school experience in Alabama. You said you turned the program around at Goshen. Can you talk about maybe some specifics about what that job was like and what you did?
The school is very rural. The basic premise was they didn't know how to read music. There was duct tape on the instruments, and I had to find a way to get these students to rise to the occasion. And the marching band was not my focus. I needed to teach them how to play their instruments. So we started doing concert band every day instead of focusing so much on marching band. I moved it to after school because the kids needed more time learning to play the instruments. And so that first year, there was a lot of singing, That's one of those things I pulled from Robert W. Smith. I know that, band directors tend to be a little scared or afraid of singing, but things always got better when Robert W. Smith would make us sing at Troy. So I started implementing singing, and the kids, of course, fought me on it. But we got to the point where we would sing all of our music. And that first year we taught, most of it was probably taught by rote. A lot of the kids still could not read music by the end of the year. It was an interesting situation, but we went on to festival and got straight superior ratings. One of the judges, who I'm still friends with to this day, she called me up and asked me how I got them to sound that good. So I'm a little guy from Alabama and South Alabama, and just changed the situation at a school. And so it was a challenge. But so often you can get discouraged in a moment like that. But I knew that I wasn't there to basically build my resume. I was there to build the kids up. And that was, when you're in a situation like that, there's only one way up, one way to go, and it's up. And so I had to find ways and tools and techniques to get the kids on board to move forward. And it worked out for them. So
do you have any other advice for a young teacher who's just starting out?
Well, I think the most important thing is to realize that the festival scoring system, we're very competition based in our field. And there are moments when competition goes against the very essence of what we do. We're music educators first. We're teachers. The greatest word in the English language is teacher. And so competition sometimes eliminates the entire idea of teaching and education. So what type of child do you have? What type of student do you have? What are the challenges that they have at home? In rural Alabama, they tend to be very poor. There tends to be, many, many different things. Their instruments are not going to be of good quality. So you have to set aside any set paradigm or situation that you have in your mind, and you have to just go after it. You're teaching people. And it's not necessarily going to be perfection, but it's about the journey that you take your students on. And I think just by providing them with a system and a clear and concise idea of what your goals are, and those goals may not fit any other program around you. You don't have to set your goals and your plans around a program that has 350 people in it. So many people think they've got to emulate and copy something that's down the road that's super successful, but your little program is your little program, and you've got to find a way to make it work. And there are different ways to do that. And I think the most important thing after all of that is done is that you have to identify your stakeholders, the parents, the administration, and the community around you. They want to be on your side. So what can you do to bring them in and make sure that all the stakeholders within a program, because a lot of directors will not really, seek help from their administration or seek help from their community. They're so focused on the room that they're in with their students. They really don't step outside and realize that there are lots of different entities that could help facilitate and foster the program. And when you have kids that are diminished in an economic situation like that, you have to find ways to build them up. And there are ways to do that. You can find sponsors. You can bring community members in to perform with them, which is one of the main things. I brought an entire church's choir. There was like 60-member choir in from this church to sing with the band at one point in time on our holiday concert. And by the time I left there, these holiday concerts we did, because it's very, very, very religious area right there on the Bible Belt, and people really want to celebrate Christmas, and you can do that. I know there's a lot of rules and things in some school systems, but a community also dictates and helps you dictate what is important for your students. And so at that time, my program there was built around making sure the community was part of it, and then they embraced the kids. And by being inspired by the community, by having an audience, by having people that support them, it's amazing what a child can do and accomplish. And so,
yeah, that's really great advice. And I really like that. So you then you got your master's at the University of Alabama, and then you took these lessons with you to the desert. You went to Nevada.
I did. I did. I came out to Nevada and started my doctorate in 2005, finished all the coursework, of course, and in about 2 years. And then I started applying for jobs, realizing that the doctorate was something I needed. I did have a couple of interviews, but I got all the way up to the provost of one of the schools and he asked me, "When will you finish your doctorate?" I really would like to hire you. And it was one of those experiences like, I don't know when I'm going to finish the doctorate. I'd been in school through my master's and my doctorate. I was slightly tired, I think, but I was ready to conduct and work. And at the same time this was happening, the economy, of course, was starting to batter. If we think about 2009, 2008, the economy in Vegas hit pretty late, and the economy went down across the United States. But here we had a lot of musicians move out of town going from 2007, 8 into 2009. And I was hired, of course, to conduct this 90-piece orchestra for a church in town. And that 90-piece orchestra, because of the economy, never really showed up. We had multiple rehearsals, and the musicians in the group, there was about 20 musicians that showed up, and the string players were very they were older, and the music, there really wasn't any music that they could read or play well anymore. And the wind players, of course, there was about 10 wind instruments in the program, and they were just really strong players. I knew some of them from UNLV, and the decision came down: do we do away with this entire orchestra, or do we turn it into something else? So a decision came down. We decided to turn it into a dectet, a wind dectet. So we played Dvorak's Wind Serenade and chamber music. We basically spent a year doing chamber music, rolled it into a community band the next year, and the organization has just continued to grow. We separated from the church and became our own nonprofit, and so from there, it's just really grown into something that keeps me pretty busy. And then, of course, I work in the schools. I worked with a bunch of marching bands when I first got out here on staff, and then that's just turned into helping younger teachers and band directors with programming and how to solve some of the problems that they have. Because in Las Vegas, we have every single type of socioeconomic challenge. We have some success stories. We have every type of program. It's a cross section of every possible program you could possibly have in music in Las Vegas. And there are schools where I have to go through security in order to get to the students, and there's only one entrance to the school. There are some schools I walk right into the band room, and there's no security check at all. I've seen so many things happen in town. So I feel like, I've been in Vegas so long, and I feel like I have something to contribute, because helping young teachers become successful, that's important, because our future, our entire field is built around the future, and how they facilitate the educational process in their classrooms is important to me. And so that's the main thing that I do. And of course, I teach 2 hours a day for a charter school. Charter schools are people either love the idea or they dislike the idea. And charter schools have a completely different challenge. I didn't understand music education in the charter school system until I consulted with them to build programs for the Pinecrest system here in Nevada. And this year, of course, they asked me about 6 times if I would take on 2 classes of middle school band at this one school last year. And I decided, I'm going to do this because I want to find a way to solve the problems for charter schools as well. And it rounds out my educational prowess, what I can do to help band directors in all situations, because the charter school system is a little different. And so that's the big idea of what I do in Vegas and why I'm here.
All right. So there's 2 things there. I'm going to separate them out, though, for my interview. Okay. And so let's talk about this consulting job that you've created. Now, did you create this for yourself?
Well, it just started. We have funding through Desert Winds to base. Yeah. So there's funding through Desert Winds, and Desert Winds pays me, but they don't pay me to conduct the Desert Winds. The basic premise in our entire organization is music education and teaching and continuous music. So the whole idea is to make sure that students are set up to realize they can do anything. They can be doctors and lawyers, because the Desert Winds has doctors and lawyers performing in it at a very high level, almost at the professional level, but they still have day jobs that they have interest in. And so the idea has been to put money into, paying me, and we pay other teachers too. We pay them to go in and help with the band directors in town, because it got to the point I am actually scheduled in 20 band rooms in the next 5 weeks. So it's, I spend my mornings going around and working with teachers and answering questions about programming. There's lots of challenges and things that you just don't know coming out of music programs now. So that's how that works. And, it's at no cost to the school. There are some schools that do pay me. The principal does pay me. But for the most part, it's just a consulting thing. Desert Winds funds most of that, my time going out. And if we pay a private teacher to go help a horn section or something, we do that from time to time as well.
So let's talk about the Desert Winds. This is a big thing and a notable thing. And so can you tell me all about it?
Community bands are very important to the heritage and history of our country. We don't have as many community bands as we used to. The purpose has changed. And in Las Vegas, of course, the community band concept is a little different than it would be in Texas or in the South. If you imagine Las Vegas being about 60, 70 years old. Like the university is only 60 years old. The town itself is not that old. And so there's not a heritage and history of band or orchestra in our town. You do have the history of the show bands, of course, on the Strip, but there's a difference between the arts and entertainment. And so the Desert Winds, I thought the Desert Winds was just going to be this little community band that I did until I went to take a college job. And then I realized there really wasn't a lot of places for euphoniums and saxophones to play in town. There was, unless you were on the Strip. And the idea of continuous musicianship became very a big part of my passion. I'm really close friends with the guys at the Brooklyn Wind Symphony, and they're about a year older than our organization. So I work very closely with them to see how they develop their program in New York. We do it a little different because we have to pay for venues, and we have to pay, we're a member of ASCAP. We pay all of our royalties, which is extremely important for bands to do. And I hope most bands are doing that. I know there was a period of time when people didn't do that, but we focus a lot. It costs a lot of money to do that. We do sell tickets to concerts, and the organization it keeps expanding. It keeps me here. I keep trying to think about I want to go teach college, but we have such a large 48 high schools, 57 middle schools or so in the Valley. And that's not including all the charter schools and private schools. That's just our Clark County School District. So the Desert Winds has an overwhelming need to be an artistic center for what can be done with band music and composers. And we have a great Philharmonic here. We have the wonderful wind orchestra at UNLV, but the purposes of those two organizations are not the same. And, you have an educational environment where you're fostering the education of future music teachers and performers at UNLV. And then the Philharmonic is supposed to be the pristine idea of performance. And, there's a lot of different factors that go into, why the Desert Winds is important. But I think the primary goal and objective is to perform the literature, because I think this literature that we have, band literature, what composers are putting out, is so vitally important to our humanity and to our existence. Desert Winds has a very personal, community-based performance scheme, and all of our concerts are built around all of the stakeholders. I talked about stakeholders within a high school. We also have stakeholders as a performing organization. We have to consider, what is it that our audience needs to hear? What is it that our musicians need to play? And what is it that we need to do for the medium? And so all of those ideas go into every program that we put on. And this year alone, we've expanded. We have the 15, which is named after our highway and that runs through Vegas. It's our jazz group that's just now starting to kick off. We have a summer camp that we started last summer, and we had 200 kids apply for it, but we didn't want to overdo it. So we only took 90. This year, we're expanding that camp because there's a lot of things that you think of Las Vegas as being a big city, but we're still very behind in things that are normal to a big city, such as having a camp or having a top-notch wind ensemble, or, all these different things that go into the arts and separates from the performance aspect of the Strip. There's the entertainment aspect. And I think that, artistic performances of a group like ours, they're still entertaining, but it's a different form of entertainment. We do fight the Las Vegas Strip, and I think they can work hand in hand and live in harmony. And that's the one thing that we work towards. So.
Yeah, I have a friend who lives in Las Vegas. I know a little bit about the school systems, but it seems like that Las Vegas is an interesting city for music because, as you mentioned, it has the high level of professional musicians working on the Strip, and it also has a pretty well-funded school district for music. Am I correct?
Yes, we have the largest school music program in the nation, and that gets put out there a lot. And so we have, and there are some challenges with that because you have so many music teachers. Some of our high schools do have 2, 3 directors. Most of them have, 1 or 2. And so just the funding and the ability to find that many music teachers is a challenge for our school district. But music has been has had a primary place in the education of our students for many, many years. I think we owe that to Marcia Neal, I think, and Rick McEnany. Those are 2 figures in town that have been very staunch in their support and making sure that music is protected, because we do go through the same budget fights in our state legislature about education funding. Are we going to pass a tax? Are we going to do these things? And music seems to always be the thing that comes up to cut. But those 2 individuals, I think, have fought very hard and in such a way that has protected the music programs. And we have a vast community of music teachers that are really, really awesome and great to work with. So.
Okay. And so you mentioned a couple times in your discussion of the Desert Winds, you talked about ASCAP royalties, you talked about the music, you talked about composers, and I want to ask you about that aspect, working with composers, commissioning, and the place of an ensemble in that.
We've had a few pieces commissioned. Peter Meakin, which you recently had on, he was the one guy that he's very good at getting his music out there. And he basically at one point said, I'm writing this piece. I want to put the Desert Wind's name on it. And it's called Forgotten Children, a piece that he wrote. And he paid his way down because, getting people to realize we have to pay people to come out and we have to, pay royalties and pay the composer. But he was so eager and he's become such a good friend and helped us to convince our board and people, one of the stakeholders, of course, is the funders, the donators, the people that provide funding to our organization, to realize that having a Peter Meakin out here is very, very important to the process. So we've had him out a couple times. And of course, Ralph Ward has been out a couple times. He'll actually be out again in March because he's adjudicating the festival for our Pinecrest system, and he'll work with the Desert Winds again, of course. And we commissioned him to write It's Vegas Baby for Midwest in 2016. And it's just it's incredible. He writes this slot machine into the mallet percussion, and I just never thought that it would work. And it just sounds like a slot machine. Really cool aspect of that. And it fits his personality. And he wrote that in dedication to Tom Leslie at UNLV because, he has a story, and if you ever talk to Ralph Ford, I'll let him tell the story. But it's a really cool story about, because Tom Leslie represents all that is Vegas, and he's the conductor of the wind orchestra at UNLV, and my conducting teacher, of course, and then probably the most poignant piece that we've ever commissioned, and when we speak of commissioning composers, we were on a commissioning project for pay with Peter Meakin, but the most poignant moment for me as a conductor was Julie Giroux. She wrote a piece for my father and for Midwest in 2016, and that journey was probably the most poignant. Just the way the conversation worked. We got on the phone at like 12 in the morning, Vegas time, which was probably 2 in the morning, Mississippi time, where she lives. And she said, I just want to hear about your father. I just want to hear about your story. And so we talked, and it felt like she was like my best friend. And I had never talked to her before. I'd never actually met her. But when I was going through the process of trying to figure out, my family had decided they wanted to pay for this commission in honor of my father. And I knew that I was surrounded by composers. So I had Ralph Ford and Robert W. Smith and there's many people. Pete was my friend, of course, at that time. did I really want somebody that knew me personally? So I decided to go with somebody that really didn't know anything about me, that would write from a complete outside perspective. And so reading the post, I'm very much into the love of people and humanity. And that's the overarching idea and how I walk through life. And when you read Julie Giroux's post, her understanding and her poignancy and how she speaks about loss and love and death and all these things on Facebook or when you have conversations with her was so different than any composer I had met before. And so she was an easy go-to in choosing to write the piece for my father. And so she wrote Hearthstone in memory of him. And I remember at the end of it, she asked me if I could do her a favor. And I said, sure. She said, can I write this for free? I need to write this for you because it's a journey for me that I need to go on as a composer. And it was incredible. And I feel comfortable speaking about that because she wrote on Facebook at one point that she does, write pieces with no fee. And I had the money to pay her for it. And so it just struck me. She wanted to do that. And it was so my situation in dealing with commissions has been a little different than most. And I look forward to commissioning more pieces and having money to do that and paying composers because I think it's vitally important. I think a composer, teacher is one of the most important words in the English language, but I think composer is also a very important word. And if you are a composer, I think you have this incredible responsibility to our society and to our people to constantly remind us of what our humanity is about and what it is to be cognizant and aware of what's going on in the world. So that's I always love having composers visit. I always love the composition process. I always love looking at new literature. And, the first thing I want to read about the piece, where it came from, what was its inspiration. There are pieces that have no inspiration, that were just written for music's sake. But at this time, in dealing with one of the stakeholders, our audience with Desert Winds, I always look for those pieces that have a really, really strong relationship to the composer.
So Chuck, you brought it up earlier, the idea of competition in music. And so where do you draw the line? I know you mentioned it briefly, but where do you draw the line at healthy versus unhealthy competition?
I think there is many different ideas that go into competition, and it should be a measurement of where you are. We're a data-driven society in the United States, and so how successful are our students? How do we measure that? How do we justify that so that when funding cuts do happen? I think a lot of places they've changed it from festival or competition, or contest to MPA or music performance assessment, so that it does have that line of data acquisition in it. But I think there are a lot of aspects that go into it. Directors have been trained to be in competition. That's one of those things. Every director that's out there right now, when they were in high school, there was a competition aspect. And so winning is this overwhelming arching idea in our field. And I think what we have to redefine or decide what winning actually is. And in that, conductors or young band directors will choose literature that is a little too hard for their students. And so, competition drives this need to impress people. And I think that we remove the educational aspect of that when we worry about the impressions that we leave on people. And I've heard it said many times that especially concert band competitions, or festivals, they are band director competitions. And they're actually not. It's really educational based. If you make this educationally based at all turns, it's not negative for the student. So it's not about making that superior rating. It's about taking this journey. And I think if you keep the kids and the students at the center of the entire process and their well-being and their betterment as musicians, then the process doesn't really take over. It's not a competition. It's an event, and you measure the musical growth of your students. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But the idea that a band director's got to go and show off, I can't tell you how often I have to not really scold, but suggest to directors, young directors, that your literature is too hard. It's because you want to conduct this piece, and it's really not about you. I say all the time, people think that when I conduct the Desert Winds, it's a semi-professional group, and how often you get to program and conduct everything you want to. And that's not true. I have too many people to think about. And I want to think about my audience and the musicians. And there may be one piece on a program each time that I conduct that I actually wanted to conduct. It's not about me. And it's very difficult as conductors and band directors to remove ourselves from the process. And the success of our programs, if we keep our programs centered on the education of the student, then it comes back to us. That success is we see what the teacher's doing, and we don't have to be. We can be humble and approach the education of our students, but once we keep it center based on the student, I don't think there's a problem with competition. It goes into, if we talk about marching band competitions, there's generally not a plan. When I go into work with marching bands, there's not a plan of rehearsal. It's something I learned from Susan Smith a long time ago, Robert W. Smith's wife, when she came to Troy, is that when she would come and rehearse drill with the marching band at Troy, there was a plan, and everybody knew the plan, and this is what we're doing. And a system of execution within a program is needed. And directors will sometimes go to the field not with a plan, and they'll spend hours and hours and hours of rehearsal preparing for a competition, because hours and hours and hours is what gets you a superior rating or gets you into a competition that you win. Actually focused time with your students and putting them in the center of the process, making them feel part of the process. I learned that from Susan Smith a long time ago, and she went on to teach high school in Montgomery and with the St. James, and was highly successful with the program. Now teaching music ed at Troy University, and she just has so much to offer. But that's the one thing that I take from Susan Smith, is just having a plan. And it's not something meant to make you uncomfortable as a teacher. I think that makes the competition less about the competition and more about the students. When you have a process and there's a journey, and the competition isn't about the rating, it's about the journey that you take with your students and the growth and the experience. Those things are vitally important, because they go into developing the humanity of the student, and not just that one moment, that one competition, that one moment in time that they will remember for a little bit and then move on in life and never think about again. It's about the journey.
Yeah, I like that. All right. So what hard-earned lessons as a teacher or a conductor would you like to pass along?
I think there's a couple things. One of the most important things is not being afraid to invite people in. And they don't have to be people that you've heard about. You can bring in colleagues and friends. I know in Las Vegas, and this is not to, talk down the programs here, but we have a very, very limited outreach system. There are so many directors in town, but they really don't visit each other. I would hope at some point in time, school systems that are as large as ours would implement a system where you have to go and observe and assist and see other teachers, because we can learn from each other. This is not, again, that competition thing pours over into this. And so, being able to invite people in and not feel threatened. You are the director, so you get to decide whether you use the information provided. But I think students seeing numerous people working in the field, reiterating what you do, is vitally important. And there are directors that do that. And then there are some that do not. I think also one of the lessons is not over programming. I've done that before, and it's not fun. And you'll have an adjudicator or somebody tell you, or somebody come in, Robert W. Smith, I keep going back to him for some reason, but I remember he came in at one point in time with my band when I was in Gulf Shores and said, this piece is a little fast. And it was like, well, I like this tempo. And I puffed up as if I had something to say, but he's Robert W. Smith, and I'm in my third year of teaching, and how dare I challenge him? So being open and to knowledge, the best teachers are lifelong learners. It doesn't stop when you leave college. And so just being comfortable in the fact that you don't know everything. It's a really, really wonderful place to be, when you're that comfortable with yourself that your kids, you can't provide everything to your kids. Knowing that, and is vitally important, and being able to bring people in. And of course, just having a plan, going back to Susan Smith's thing, is just having a plan is so important. We have to think about music education in many different ways. Every person in our band is not going to be a music major. And the walls of, if we're thinking about a high school program, this is something that's vitally important. Band is not the only thing those kids are doing. And we sometimes think that band should be the only thing that they're doing, but we don't get to dictate that as band directors. We're not their parents. Directors tend to take ownership over kids and dictate to them what they can and cannot do outside of the band room. And it's an interesting challenge. We had 900, just to give you a little statistic, we had 986 kids graduate out of high school band last year in Las Vegas, which is a vast number. Only about 80 of them went on to college band programs. So we're burning kids out with the number of rehearsals, I think. And this isn't every program, but if you can't get it done in a couple hours a week after school, then you probably need to reevaluate what you do, or just call Susan Smith and she'll come out and put a system in place for you to help you. But we got to put the kids more at the center of what we do and think about their overall well-being. And we want to build lifelong consumers of music. That's probably the most important thing that we can do. We kill our own field off when we don't teach the appreciation and the need for consumership of music, because most of our kids aren't going to be music majors. They're going to go out and they're going to do things. They need to have a love for this literature so that people like Mark Connor can make money as a composer and make a living. It's vitally important. And, we talk about musicians getting paid and having it's not a really great field. Well, we do that to ourselves because we don't instill a need and desire to have this humanity mirroring art at the center of what we do. Musicians that were in high school or middle school need to consume music if they're not going to be in college band. They need to have an appreciation for it. And we leave out the appreciation part. And therefore, we're basically eliminating the need for our programs. So we could be our biggest enemy.
That's really interesting, which kind of bleeds into my question about what are the challenges facing music education in the 21st century. Does that sort of go along with that idea?
It does. I think the challenges that we face, just putting the student at the center of everything that we do. We have these paradigms and systems in place that have been passed down to us from those people that taught at a different time than us. We have to realize that our students, if we haven't thought about it, they haven't had a time in their life where there wasn't a computer or a cell phone in their home. These students have had more technology and more fast-paced pieces of knowledge thrown at them than any other time in history. And so the way we educate, the way we facilitate our programs has to be reevaluated. The way we did it 10 years ago probably needs to be a little different than now. And so it's just one of those things. I think, another piece of advice is that, everybody, young directors can get very discouraged very quickly. And, we need to be, older directors, people that are coming in to help them need to be open to the fact that our opinions are opinions, and not all opinions are worth the palette of air upon which they were spoken. We spit these words of knowledge out, but, do you understand the fact that you have a kid whose parents were killed? This is something I deal with in Vegas a lot. We have a middle school where every time I've been there in the last 2 years, an ambulance has been there to take a child out of the school. And a lot of people can't imagine that situation. She will never make, the band director there will never make a 2 or a 1 at festival, but that's not her job. Her job is to, be in there and to have perspective and provide perspective. She's the one positive moment in some of those kids' lives, and what a poignant and important. She's just as important as the director down the road who has 360 people in their band program and makes superior ratings all the time. Those two directors have different programs. And I think being open that, appreciating what you have and putting the students back at the center of it, I think that's important.
Let me ask you about your work-life balance. How do you find that in everything that you do?
So I basically have slowed down this year. It's, taking care of myself and not being on a plane all the time. And that was part of the reason I took the charter school job, because it's 2 hours a day, and they're very supportive of when I need to get on a plane or go somewhere and work, and just helping directors out. I think, I've created a schedule. I need to not start my day too early. I am a late night thinker. So I think making sure that my day doesn't start super early, and it's one of those things I've always stayed up very late. And the reason is because I don't like to be bothered when I'm thinking. My score study usually happens at 1 a.m. And I love it. And I put my headphones in and I listen so I don't disturb anybody around me. But it's, I think I do a pretty good job. I go back to I worked really, really hard and many, many hours, and I ran myself ragged before my dad passed away in 2014. And you have moments like that come along, and I just started to remember what was important. And I know that if I look back in time and on a time when I wasn't taking care of myself, I wish if I was thinking about 20 years ago, I would probably doubt myself less and spend more time with my family and take care of myself, because band directors can get burnout. And I think you just have to take a cognizant point of view and be aware that you have to take care of yourself. So you're there for your students and the musicians. We have an incredible responsibility, just like you as a composer, I as a conductor and music teacher. We have an incredible responsibility. Our students appreciate us generally more than other teachers, just because of the type of material that we're providing to them and the type of experience. And so we have a huge responsibility. And if we are not there, if we're sick, if we're not taking care of ourselves, if we're not balancing our life out, I think that it basically takes away from our responsibility. So
you just talked about taking more time when you were younger. Do you have any other advice? Do you have advice that you would give your 20-year-old self?
I think back, I was teaching that school, that program, where my first year of teaching, where they had not done so well. And if I think back to what I could have done differently, I was pretty aggressive, and I was very staunch in my rules. I think I would like to have been a little bit more relaxed. And the doubt that sits on our shoulder is one of those crippling things that takes place in the arts. Composers, conductors, musicians, we always have this sense of doubt. And to think that I am the only person with doubt in my life, that would be ridiculous, right? I need to think that my students also have those doubts as they're learning. So I think anything I could have done as a younger teacher to eliminate some of that doubt. Some of that doubt is healthy, I think, but letting kids know that it's okay to get better. It's okay to think that some things are not as good. And we're our biggest critics, especially in the arts and music. We're so hard on ourselves. And I think if I could have learned what I know now and doubted myself and my musicians less and just spent more time on the processes and building it up, I think that would have been more important. Spending more time with my family, of course, when I was 20, because I was really busy and I lived far away from home. And, I'm an only child with my parents. And, I think spending more time with them would have been pretty cool.
So, Chuck, the last piece you'd want to perform or conduct?
Such a difficult question, and it would probably change every day. I am super enamored with this piece, the Archangels. It's a symphony by Swiss composer Franco Cesarini, and it's in 4 movements. It's one of those pieces that I think changes the way we think about band music and music, because at some point in time, when does band music become just as important to our society as orchestral literature? It's important to me now, but when does society realize it? And I think one of those, it has to be a poignant piece. It has to be a piece that we can relate to. And I think I love Cesarini's music. I think he's just really incredible with the way he writes. But the Archangel Symphony hasn't been performed very much. But that's the piece. It's super, intense and just beautiful. It's energetic. It goes through 4 of the archangels, of course, and describes them musically better than anything written about them. And it's just that would be the piece.
Yeah. So this is the point where I ask if there's anything you'd like to share or promote. But I did have one more question that just popped into my head. I wanted to ask you, one of the things about the Desert Winds that I'm most impressed with is you have remarkable branding and programs, and it's a color on everything. Who's responsible for that? Where does that come from?
So we start, and the process is going to shift a little bit because we're changing when our season begins. But I realized that it goes back to Vegas not being very old. And so when we started putting programs together, I wanted to have a binding element to the season so that it was tangible to an audience, that because we didn't ever want to bring in the people that would wear tuxedos to the concerts. We want regular people to come in and listen to band music. And so in order to break that down, if they go to an orchestral concert, they have no idea what they're listening to, and putting a visual to it. We're a very visual, technology-based society. And so we started in the very early days putting a season together. Every concert has a concept behind it. This season is places. So it's basically literature from different places, or our May concert is the soul. So it's pieces that are rooted in the soul, if you imagine the soul as a place. So not everything is completely tangible, but it's to give the audience an idea and sense of where the music is going. And then I have probably the most incredible graphic designer. He's one of my best friends. And so we basically sit down and I develop the concept of the season. I put major works in all of the concerts, and then sometimes what he comes up visually, we will just, I'll tell him what I want to see, or he'll just come up with the concept, and then I'll program the rest of the concert around what he has presented visually. So there's no set way we program and create things, but it starts with an overarching idea to create a tangibility with our season so that we gain an audience, and it has worked.
Yeah, I love the way you do it. I think it's really a great thing for anyone who's a band director or a music director, or you're programming a season to kind of check out what the Desert Winds does with this, because it's really great. It's really attractive.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, and there have been groups that have started in town that have started to do what we do, which is, I was asked in an interview for a magazine in the fall, like, are you upset that so and so is copying this, and it's a more important organization in town? I won't mention the name. And I was like, I'm not. If we are causing more people to want to come to concerts because somebody's copying our concepts, then by all means do it. There's no copyright on that. It's just, we want to make sure that people feel comfortable. They come to our concerts, and if they're wearing jeans or something, we don't really care. We ask people to take out cell phones and to post on Facebook that they're there, because the first thing you do is you tell people to put their cell phones up, and we're moving to a place where that's just not going to happen. We don't want them recording, of course, but we do tell them, post that you're here, talk about the pieces that you like. And I think over the years, the most important thing is when we do surveys with our audience, there's a different piece. They all don't agree that the best piece was this piece, right? It used to, there would be one piece on the program that everybody loved. Now everybody leaves our concerts with a different piece being their favorite. So we've done a really good job of educating and fostering this process with our community, which is vitally important.
Excellent. All right, Chuck. So this episode, even though we're recording on the 1st of February, this episode will be released February 26th. So with this in mind, is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote for the listeners?
The one thing that I would like to mention is that we have our camp coming up this summer, and it's going to be on July the 16th through the 21st. It's open to everybody that's around Las Vegas. So if you're in California or Arizona and you want to check out, it'll be up on our website by the end of February, and see if you want to come. We're trying to keep the cost very low for our students. Camps can get very, very expensive, but we just really want to foster that education with the camp. And then, of course, we'll have a couple chamber concerts throughout the season. And then at the end of May, Memorial Day weekend, we will have our big Souls concert, and we're joining the Battleborn Chorale, and that'll be 7:30 p.m. at the Las Vegas Academy in downtown Las Vegas. So
how can people get in touch with you?
The easiest way would be to email me. It's Charles A. Maguire @gmail.com. And it's just one word, no dots or anything.
Excellent. Chuck, I want to thank you so much for this interview. You're very thoughtful, and you had some really insightful things, and I'm really grateful for your time.
Oh, thank you, Mark. It was a pleasure.